Life Christian Broadcasting Network presents The Bible. God's Voice of Prophecy with Jack Berg.
Good evening. This is Jack Berg. I'm pastor at Sun Valley Baptist in Northeast El Paso. And I want to talk to you this evening, and we've come together to look at prophecy. And I want to do just an overview very quickly of the book of Revelation and some of the things that are said. Because so very often with prophecy, what we get is, you guys have been saying this forever. And you know they're true. It is true. We've actually been studying and looking for prophecy for 2,000 years. Because many of the early church fathers were expecting an early return of Christ, and they put Nero down as being the cause of it. Reality of it is, now we're down to the end, and I think we are down to the end, and we're looking at the signs that really comprised the warnings about the second coming. And those are the things that we need and want to take a look at tonight. Some would say, though, that, prophecy is divisive. One of your largest churches in the nation will not do prophecy because it causes division. And it will cause division. It certainly will. And it scares people, which is part of it. It's like the truth. The truth causes division among people because some people will not believe the truth. Sometimes people will say it's too difficult to understand, or I don't want to take the time to study it. It's not practical. It takes too much time to figure out. All these things are true. Yet in Revelation chapter 1, verse number 3, we have a verse there which is very unique. It says, "Blessed is he that readeth, and they that hear the words of this prophecy, and keep those things which are written therein, for the time is at hand." And some of it, definitely that's prophesied here, was at hand. But most of it, the vast majority of it, was on down in the future. But it does tell me there's a special blessing for those who read and understand it. I don't know about you, but I like every blessing I can get. So I'm going to take the time to study it and try and understand it and to put it to use. And I think from everything that Scripture says, we are in that time and that place. If God tells me there's something special about something, then I want to know what it is. And certainly I want the blessing which comes out of it. Maybe it's the time we live in that makes it special. This last year has been a totally different year. And everything is changing, and not all for the better. Yet God has seen fit to give us warnings that protect us and prepare us for the times to come. In fact, 1/4 of all of Scripture is prophecy. Think about that. All the thousands of verses. A quarter of that is all devoted to prophecy, whether it was short-term prophecies of things that were going to happen in the Middle East, or whether it was long-term prophecies of things that were going to happen in the future. You come into the New Testament, and here you have one whole book that's devoted to prophecy. And all through here we see different prophecies that are given, both about short-term again and about long-term. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse number 1, Paul tells Timothy here, "This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying the power thereof. From such turn away." What did Paul mean? Well, I think if we're looking at the age that we're living in, we're seeing our crime rate begin to skyrocket. Yes, I know that's coming from certain policies that are coming from a certain group of people. But nonetheless, we see our crime rate skyrocketing. We see billions of dollars worth of damage that's been done around the nation. We see our death rate has increased so much that we now say that the average American will live 1 year shorter than what he would have lived in the past. The covetous, I think that's really easily, if Americans are honest, we're a very covetous nation. And we look to see how much we can gain. But that's not just true of Americans. That's true all over the world. Disobedience to parents, I think most parents would understand that. Unthankful, unholy, without natural affection. In other words, we can do and kill a baby. We can cut one up in the uterus, or we can deliver the baby live and then put it to death. We can sell its parts. I think in times past, overall, as much as we may hear what we've heard about coat hanger abortions and so forth, in all reality, this is not something which was true to any great extent. Today it is. And in fact, we do it for money. We have the lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. And without going into a great deal of detail, we have pleasure that is done completely and we ignore God. In fact, we even make churches so that they are giant social clubs. We make churches so that you can take your trailer or your boat or whatever it may be. You can drive it in, drive it out, and don't have to waste time going back to the house to get things to go out. Having a form of godliness. We understand that because we have so many churches and so many people. Yes, I'm a Christian, but they never live it. It's not part of their life. It's not followed, and they deny the power thereof. You know, it's true, though, that also the early church fathers studied prophecy also. Two of them arrived at I think probably a very good and sane decision that they would not try and identify the Antichrist till he was here. They said it'll be impossible to do that until he's here. And these were men that were trained and raised around John the Apostle. So they were men who understood, and I think John probably maybe have even given us some information that he's told to seal up in Scripture. But regardless, down through the ages, prophecy has been studied. It's been understood by believers to be accurate and was to be a blessing to us. And in many cases, most of them said it's in the future. Well, I think we're in the future. And I think we're here. We're seeing all the signs that we see. And I think it's pretty apparent what it is, what it's leading us to. But you know what that means? We can also say, I can face tomorrow because Christ lives. He's resurrected. He lives, and he's coming back, and he's coming soon. What are some of the signs? Will the nation of Israel together again? During World War II, we know that 6 million Jews died. We actually reached a point where many people said the Jews will never have the power to come back together. Yet 3 years, almost to the day of the surrender of Germany, the nation of Israel was alive and well. It made the desert bloom. There was a time and a place, if you went up to buy the sprinkler sets that you use in your gardens and so forth, you'd find the name that they were made in Beersheba, Israel, and that was one of the very strong points of the Jew. We see the alignment of the Arab nations. We see the Arabs, Saudi Arabia and others, that are lining up against Iran. There is a war that's going on between those two right now. We're a part of it, although our part is mainly in supplying of weapons and so forth. But I don't think there's a shadow of a doubt in anybody's mind who knows that there's a coming war among the Middle East nations. And we see that, and we see that Iran will crush Saudi Arabia. And we see that in Isaiah 17 and Isaiah 21. And you can look it up, you can read it. You'll have to do a little research to it, but it's very accurate, it's very clear. We see the destruction of Damascus. We see the destruction of Saudi Arabia, and it says the gullies will flow with fire. You know, a few years ago, we would not understand that, but today we saw that actually literally happen in Kuwait. As the oil ran down the gullies and it was on fire. And I remember people saying it would take years to clean it up, but in the end, it took only months to put it out and put it back into production. Look at the lineup of nations in Ezekiel 38 and 39. It is so accurate. To see that line up today, to see the name of nations which exist today, Libya, Persia, which is Iran. And if you're not familiar with it, Iran means the Aryan nation. We saw that during World War II, and many people, young people, will not know what that means, but it's a very serious line or a name that's given there. But in Ezekiel 38 and 39, we see Turkey, we see Iran, we see others which would come against Israel. And it's interesting to note that most of those are not the Arab nations. They are rather they're those nations which are aligned with Iran. There's a new peace pacts that are being developed in the Middle East. It's an answer to prophecies given of a 10-nation coming together. And these nations are coming together and they signed peace pacts with Israel. We have Egypt, we have Jordan, we have the UAE, we have Saudi Arabia is certainly on the verge of doing that. And it would look at us and say, this sounds like the 10 nations coming together, which are given in different places in Scripture. We also have something new this last year we've never had. That's a worldwide plague that's been devastating, regardless of what we may want to say about it. But the restrictions which have been placed on that have become a part of our lives. And it prepares us and puts us in an area where we'll be ready for the restrictions and so forth that will come with the Antichrist. It's the restrictions that are so severe in some areas, you have to have a certain pass which says you are either had the COVID and you're clear of it, you had the shots or something else, but you are now clear and you can come back into this country or perhaps leave different states, not just countries, but different states. It really could be the forerunner of the mark of the beast. There's other possibilities we'll look at. Because there's groups in the Middle East who wear certain bands on their right arm. They wear headbands around their head, which also could be very certainly a mark which could be used towards that end. There's wars and rumors of wars. We have so many wars going today, and we have rumors of new wars starting. We even have warnings of wars that are taking place or could take place in Europe. It's just the start of things. We have new weapons which are out there, small nuclear weapons which could be used in combat. The idea is they would give us more bang for our buck, but we still get radiation. So you still could have the cancer rates and different things go up, children which would be affected in the future. All those things are true. We have a new drone which is out. It's a drone which will reach 14,000 miles an hour. I can't even think of that, what that would be like. And of course, it's a drone, but that's moving so fast that missiles cannot line up on it yet. We have nothing to defend ourselves. This course is ours, so that's good. But nonetheless, I'm sure that there will be other countries which are behind us or ahead of us, either way, that are there. We have the biometric means of keeping track of people and things. You know, we can keep track of you, and even now, we can keep track of you from space. We have the medical records, which are done electronically. That's a grave danger to people. That means that with access by insurance companies, they can accept you or reject you. They know what will be done with your body or what will happen to your body in the future. Things that we could not have conceived of in the past, we will have access to. We have communication satellites which are being launched. In fact, just this past week, they launched a satellite which had 60 other satellites inside of it. And they're being placed in orbit to make a 30,000 satellite system which will be able to communicate instantly from every area in America. Keep in mind there are also weapons which are out there. We can make these ineffective. And that should be something which is frightening. We have false prophets and false teachers by the ton. You know, when I wrote that the first time, I started to scratch it out, and I thought, you know, looking at some of these on the TV, they look pretty heavy. It is by the ton. And we might laugh and kind of joke at that, but you know, the reality of it is these people are false teachers, false prophets, What they're saying is wrong. It's not biblical. And the punishment that was there for a false teacher or a false prophet was they were to be cast out of the church and they would never be allowed back in the church. Do we understand how serious that is? This is something that is really dominates the Western world today. Not the Eastern Christianity, but the Western Christianity. But there is Christian persecution beginning. Some of it seems types of silly, making of a cake and what's put on the cake and who's having the wedding and so forth. But it's serious. It's people, the Christians, being forced to do things that are against their beliefs and against Scripture. And we need to look at that and say, that is persecution. And it's becoming greater and greater. In Great Britain, there is a case that's up before their Supreme Court. It's not called that, but it's the same thing that it is. And what it's about is a Christian couple ordered to support gay marriages on top of it. They said, no, we can't do that. And they've been threatened with imprisonment. And the Supreme Court of Britain is the one that will have to decide. It's not just in the U.S., it's all over. And certainly throughout Africa and Asia and throughout the Middle East, Christians are daily being killed. It's something that's so serious, yet here in America, we've ignored it. It's just been turned aside. In Revelation chapter 13, it talks about the 666 number. Turn there for just a second. Revelation 13. Verse number 16. Because I want you to get kind of a feel for this, and we're going to cover this in more detail here in the near future. He says, he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark of the beast, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it's the number of a man, and his number is 666, or 666. I think it's just very difficult for us to understand some of these things as we watch them come. I want you to understand one thing. The mark of the beast, or the man of sin, or the Antichrist, is coming in the Middle East. He's not coming in New York. I've seen people say that's the false teacher will be there, and it's the city that's the one that's the false bride. That's not true. All this occurs in the Middle East. It must occur in the Middle East. It's got to be centered on Israel and on Jerusalem in particular. There's a 10-nation confederacy that's centered in the Middle East, and it's against Israel. It will attack her. I frankly think, and this is just strictly reading and studying, I think there's 3 major wars in the Middle East. And I think one of them is upon us very quickly. It's the Chinese who have taken ascendancy in the world, and they have gained an area or a place where they build ports. They come in and say, man, we'll build a port, we'll build roads, we'll build airfields, we'll do all these things for you. And when they're done, and the nation turns around, the Chinese say, we'd like to be paid for this. And they say, we don't have any money, we're broke. And they'll say, fine, we'll just take the land, we'll take part of your assets, we'll take part of your things that you produce, such as oil or rare earth. Rare earth is something that we perhaps, maybe a term most of you never heard, but without it, your computers wouldn't work. And it's something which is difficult, and some countries have it, most don't. We have it here in the center of the United States. But they come in and just literally scoop up all these assets. We have multinational companies today that they have become states in themselves. They control our speech, they control our commerce. And if you're not well aware of that, that's Facebook, who can determine what you say and what you don't say. It's Google, it's Twitter, it's you name it. They're there and out there. And they do control the things that we say and do. These are the globalists versus the nationalists that goes along with the idea of a globalist and a one-world government. In fact, the whole thing that caused the fight with Trump and his lack of popularity among the leadership in many areas was his desire to stop the one world government from being formed. You may not like the way he said it, and some of the things he did, certainly we look at and we differ with him. But as much as that may be true, he had an America first policy. America stood first, and American interests were the ones that need to be kept the most firm. It should come first. But there are others who call themselves globalists. And that is, let's be honest, that's Bill Gates. That's the men who run Microsoft. That's the men and women who run different corporations. They have become so large that they're larger than the economies of many nations combined. And they want a one world government. They want it like the EU was supposed to be, where you can go from one country to another, you can trade back and forth, and it becomes one large concern. Trump said no. He said no. It's just a few people ruling the economy, and therefore they rule the lives of the world. We forget. Now, I sometimes hear people say politics don't mean anything. They mean everything. They're what controls your life. They're what controls your taxes. They're what controls your house payment. And we need to understand there's just a rich few who want to make it so that they control everything. It's a one-world economy. And it's the concept of having no borders. And for us who live on the Southwest and live on the border, we ought to be able to understand that. It's not politics. It's the sign of the end. It's a sign of someone raising themselves up so that they can control everything. When Trump confronted NATO about the fact that a lot of the nations are not paying what they were supposed to pay into NATO, that was one way of saying America is tired of paying for what you want to get out of. And as those nations began to do what they were supposed to do, they literally produced some of the best weapons that we've seen. And that's good. One of those was a small submarine out of Sweden. The submarine was so quiet that it sank one of our aircraft carriers on pictures 6 different times. Think of that for a minute. We thought we were safe. And instead we ended up taking that submarine that Sweden had made, and we leased it so that we could get the information back so we would know how to defend ourselves. The Israelis have several of those. They're terribly quiet. They're an excellent weapon. You know what that also tells me? Nations are preparing for war. Nations are preparing for war. Nations are getting themselves into a place where they are preparing to fight. We see that in Scripture. Wars and rumors of wars everywhere. And sometimes that should frighten us. It's going to be very effective on us. And I think we need to understand as Americans, this time it's not going to be over there, it's going to be here as well. And what was tried to stop here and trying to lead us away from was the power structure that's wanted by the corporations. And they may get that now. They may. It's very possible as Christ returns, he will match himself against that one world government, and they will be sure they have a way to destroy him in what we call the Battle of Armageddon, where they will be destroyed instead. You know, we need to be searching for a coming leader. We need to be looking at the signs that are there that tell us things are close. We need to be preparing. The more we see these things happening, the massive weather change in Texas over here. Yep, there were some things done that were wrong, but you know, the other end of that was a unique situation that came up. Is that the first time it's going to happen and the only time? Or is that the beginning of something that will come up in the future? I just talked to my sister, talked to my wife's daughter, and down in Austin, she fell on the ice and broke her ankle, and they couldn't even get pain medication for her. Many of them had no electricity. Most did, but some of them had no electricity, no water. Think of it. And all of a sudden, the clock had just simply been turned back 100, 150 years, and we were not prepared for it. reality of it is, what do you think's coming in the future? You don't think that God cannot turn off our electricity or turn off our water? Are we so blatantly arrogant that we think the God of the universe cannot stop what's going on? And we need to search for that leader. Perhaps the closest that we have right now is Islam, which has a theocracy, which controls every aspect of life in a country. From what you wear, some cases for how you cut your hair, what you listen to, what you speak, what you watch. Yes, there's a lot of pushback on that from people within that, but nonetheless, it's there. And it has been controlling the lives. Not just the ISIS type thing, but Iran and Turkey, different ones. And we'll talk more about that as we come into the next time, because I think Islam plays a great part in the coming world that we will see as the end times approach. So we thank you for joining us. I pray that God would bless you. If you have any questions, you can call me at 915-755-7232. My name is Jack Berg. I'm pastor of Sun Valley Baptist Church, and we're at 9901 McCombs. And man, I do thank so much KSCE and hosting this program, and I hope it will be helpful, and I hope that you will get to enjoy it and also to learn from it as best we can. Thank you, and good night.